In our video number 7, we are going to discuss the law of diminishing marginal utility, or simply DMU. Diminishing means reducing marginal utility. So what does this law have to say? It says that the marginal utility tends to diminish or reduce, decrease as more and more units of a commodity are consumed by a consumer. How should they be consumed? They should be consumed continuously, right? Only then the marginal utility tends to diminish. Let us look at an example. Here we have the number of units consumed by a consumer and the marginal utility. The units are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And on the consumption of the first unit, the consumer gets a maximum satisfaction of 8 utils. On the consumption of the second unit, his marginal utility reduces to 6. And on the consumption of the third unit, it further reduces to 4 utils. And on the consumption of 4 units, it reduces to 2. And on the consumption of the fifth unit, the marginal utility becomes 0. And on the sixth unit, it even becomes negative. So this example shows us how his marginal utility is reducing on consumption of every additional unit. Okay, so this supports the law of diminishing marginal utility as more and more units are consumed. And these units need to be consumed continuously. So what are the assumptions for this law? This law works under the assumptions that only standard units are consumed. Suppose you choose to eat a bar of chocolate, then you must consume the same kind of bar of chocolate one after the other. Suppose you consume a cup of tea, then you have to consume cup after cup of tea and not spoon. So a standard unit has to be maintained. Then the consumption is continuous, that you consume one after the other the units of consumption. Not that you consume 1 cup of tea today and another cup of tea after 5 hours or another day. No, they have to be consumed one after the other continuously. Only then this law of diminishing marginal utility works. Now, we also saw in our last video when we represented the total utility and marginal utility graphically. At that point, we found out that when the total utility is maximum, the marginal utility is equal to 0. Now, this point where the marginal utility is 0 or the total utility is maximum, that point is called the point of satiety or the point of maximum satisfaction. The point of maximum satisfaction. Now, the consumer can consume a single commodity or two commodities. Let's first understand the consumer's equilibrium. That is, when he gets his maximum satisfaction on the consumption of a single good. So let's understand consumer's equilibrium in case of a single commodity or one commodity. Now let's assume that we are given income of the consumer and we are also given the price of goods. That means we are aware of the income of the consumer and we are also aware of the price of the goods available in the market. Now the conditions for maximization of satisfaction are that the marginal utility will be equal to the price of the commodity and the marginal utility diminishes on consumption of more and more units of the good that is consumed. That means it follows the law of diminishing marginal utility. Right? Now let's understand this with the help of an example. Let's take the price of the good X that he is going to consume is equal to rupees 2. 2 rupees per unit. Now let's assume that he consumes 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 units of the good. Okay. So what is the price of the first unit? 2 rupees. Where he is getting a satisfaction of 12 units. That means marginal utility on consumption of 1 unit is equal to 12 utils. Now he consumes 2 units. Again, each unit is priced at 2 rupees and he gains a satisfaction of 6 utils. Marginal utility is 6. Now on the consumption of the third unit, his marginal utility is 4 and his price is 2 per unit. On the consumption of the fourth unit, price being the same, his utility, marginal utility is 2. And on the consumption of the fifth unit, price remaining constant, his marginal utility has become 0. Now, what we observe over here is that at this point in the consumption of the first unit, his marginal utility is greater than price, isn't it? On the second unit also, the marginal utility is greater than price. On the third unit, we find here still the marginal utility is greater than price. 4 is greater than 2. But on the consumption of the fourth unit, we find that the marginal utility is equal to price. Price is 2, marginal utility is also equal to 2. But on the consumption of the fifth unit, we find the marginal utility is less than the price. This is 0 and this is 2. So marginal utility is less than price. Now when does he attain satisfaction? He attains satisfaction. Look at the first condition, that the marginal utility is equal to price of the commodity. So on the consumption of 4 units, his marginal utility is equal to the price. 2 is equal to 2. So this is what we are interested in. Now if we try to plot, that means what? As long as the marginal utility is greater than price, he goes on consuming another unit of the good. But when it becomes equal, he stops. And when it becomes less than, then he is at a loss. Because his marginal utility is less than the price. His satisfaction is less than the price. Now if you try to plot it on a graph, for our convenience, I have just drawn a straight line. If you try to draw the graph for MU, this is MU. Quantity or the units are represented on the x-axis and price and marginal utility are represented on the y-axis. Then price is 2, isn't it? At which the marginal utility is equal at this point. So mu is equal to p at this point, and this we are calling as maximum satisfaction because the condition is that mu should be equal to the price of the commodity to attain maximum satisfaction. This is the condition, isn't it? So we find two areas. This from here to here, this end. Okay, the whole of it will be called as total utility. The whole area under the graph represents total utility. All right, and this part of it below 2 represents his satisfaction. Okay, and then the upper part of this, that is above 2, above this line, under this will be called as consumer surplus. This is called as consumer surplus. That means he is getting more satisfaction than the price. So he will consume more and more units of the goods. And he will stop consuming at a point where his marginal utility will be equal to price. This is also the region that the consumer can pay. This is the price that the consumer can pay. All right. Now let's understand the consumer equilibrium in case of two commodities. Let us say the two commodities are good X and good Y. then the consumer's equilibrium will be given by the law of equi-marginal utility. Let's understand this. Equi-marginal utility. That means the marginal utilities of two goods is equal. The marginal utilities of both the goods is equal. That is what is law of equi-marginal utility. So what are the conditions? The first condition is, as we learned for single good, MUX should be equal to PX. That means marginal utility should be equal to the price of the commodity. For X, for good X, MUX is equal to PX. And MUY is equal to PY. That means the marginal utility and the consumption of good Y should be equal to the price of good Y. Okay, now rearranging, we find MUX by PX, the ratio of MUX by PX and MUY by PY should be equal, and that is what is the marginal utility, which is a constant. So this is a constant. Okay, now the other condition is that the marginal utility falls as more units are consumed. This is what we learned in the previous law also. Now, let us define the law. Let us state the law. The law says the consumer gets maximum satisfaction if the marginal utility of the last rupee of expenditure on each good is the same. That is why you get MUX by PX equal to MUY by PY, and that is what is a constant. Now what if the marginal utility by the price of good X is greater than the satisfaction on consumption of good Y? That implies the satisfaction from consumption of good X is greater than the consumption or the satisfaction derived from the consumption of good Y. Okay, so keeping the prices constant, what we understand from the laws that we have learned and the conditions. The condition is that MUX by PX should be equal to MUY by PY. So when can you reduce this to equate it to this? We can reduce it by consuming more and more of X. When you consume more of X, the marginal utility reduces or falls. And that is what the diminishing marginal utility states. That more and more units, when they are consumed, the marginal utility reduces or diminishes. So, to bring it to equilibrium, one has to buy more of X so that his marginal utility on X reduces. Or the other way is to buy less of Y. So, less of Y means the marginal utility on Y increases. The other situation when MUX by PX is less than MUY by PY. That means his satisfaction from X is now less than the satisfaction derived from Y. So to attain equilibrium, what will he have to do? Since this is greater, he will buy more of Y and less of X. So buy more of Y so that the MUY reduces, or buy less of X so that MUX increases. So how far can we do this? We can do this as long as MUX by PX is equal to MUY by PY, and that is what is the necessary condition, isn't it? MUX by PX is equal to PY. Okay, this is the necessary condition. So that is for two commodities, goods X and Y.